Excellent. Are we ready to start? Well, thank you very much for coming to this panel, and I'm very excited to introduce these five guests we have on the panel today. And we'll be talking about automation and digitization in Central Europe, which is very much the topic du jour at the moment around the place. I don't think I'm hardly ever sent a report by a management consultancy which doesn't include the term Industry 4.0 or the fourth industrial revolution. And this is the idea that automation, digitization, artificial intelligence, machine learning is a wave of technology which will transform industry as much as the first industrial revolution, which was one based on coal and steam power, the second industrial revolution based on mass production, the third industrial revolution, which is electricals and information technology, and then this is seen as a fourth industrial revolution. And the topic we'll be delving into is this idea of what will this do to the labour market. In terms of this was sparked off as debate across the Western world in about 2013 when a paper was published by Oxford University that said that 47% of all US jobs were going to be wiped out by the fourth technologies of the fourth industrial revolution. Now, other people have challenged these findings, saying that because these things will make things cheaper, it will, lower prices will stimulate demand for labour, and we won't see a net fall in workers. And economic historians, as opposed to economists, so economists are the people who are most worried about this, and economic historians are arguably one who at least saying people have complained about this since the first industrial revolution, and it's never happened yet. Britain has the record employment rate, but there are winners and losers in this process. In that, if there wasn't, there would be rust belts across the world. And the topic of the panel is, how will this affect Central Europe? Will it be a winner or a loser? So without further ado, I'll hand over to the panel to introduce themselves. So start off.
I think I can be heard.
Yes.
Okay.
It works. Their microphones works.
So my name is Leonardo Pucciatti. I'm a manager in ExxonMobil, and I am a manager of the function accounts payable, meaning I am an expert in paying invoices, basically. The reason why I am here is because I'm working in a BSc here in Prague, and I am working on automating activities, functions, transactional activities for the past, I think, 14 years. And I'm very interested, and I can see very clearly the difference, how is evolving the topic of automation, and even more how this is impacting on the young population of our organization. So thank you for having invited me, and this is the kind of experience I like to share with you.
So Corina is next.
Hello, thanks for having me. My name is Corina Cimpoca. I come from Romania, and I'm an owner to MKOR Consulting, which is a market opportunity research agency. As for my background, I have studied political science, PR, and also have an MBA degree. The reason I'm here today is because we've conducted a thorough research on Romanian companies and leaders and how they see the impact of automation and robotization in their companies and on their teams. Thank you.
Michal, thank you.
Andrea first. Do I go first?
Michal,
Andrea.
Okay. Okay, so my name is Michal Pěchouček. I'm an academic. I'm in the AI business and R&D for the last 25 years. I've built one of the first Czech AI centers in 2000. And we are passionate for applications. So there is like a couple of startups that was spun out of our AI center in the past. And a couple of those were successfully acquired by big corporations. So I'm here to share with you my experience where we study AI and we reason how AI is changing business and how AI is changing the way how we work.
Andrea.
My turn. My name is Andrea Renda. I'm a senior research fellow at a think tank that is based in Brussels. It's called the Center for European Policy Studies. There are a couple of other folks from CEPS around here, so if you see them, please avoid them as much as possible. And I also hold a chair for digital innovation at a university called the College of Europe that is based in Bruges and in Natolin, but where I'm based is in Bruges, Belgium. And I'm originally an economist. That's my original sin. And then I tried to move away from economics by contaminating economics with other social sciences first and then technology studies. So today I study mostly the regulation of emerging technologies, and I was recently named in the expert group on artificial intelligence by the European Commission. So I'm here also to share a little bit with you what's cooking in Brussels in terms of potential new far-reaching strategies and ideas on how to accompany the digital transformation and revolution without creating big disruptions at the social level in particular, and how the industrial, let's say, policy strategy of the European Commission is being shaped by the existing debate in Brussels and in other parts of Europe. Thank you.
Excellent. Finally, Milan from Google.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Milan Zubicek. I work at Google as a public policy manager for Central and Eastern Europe. So our team is based in Warsaw. I cover primarily Czech Republic and Slovakia, but also coordinate data governance and cloud issues across the CE region. And in the public policy team, we are focusing primarily on the regulatory aspects of our work, and of course, as Andrea mentioned, the AI and machine learning is already in the crosshair of the regulators. So I'm here today to share how we as a company look at AI and machine learning, how we already utilize machine learning in our products and in our services. And final thing, I'm a political scientist by education, so that's why I probably ended up in the public policy world in the first place.
Okay, so excellent. As a starter question, I'm going to ask each one of the panel, are you a optimist or a pessimist about the impact of Industry 4.0 in Central and Eastern Europe? So should we start on this end and we can go down?
Okay, if I can start, very honestly, I'm very optimistic. As I said, I'm working in the Czech Republic for the past 14 years. And in all this year, since the creation of a business service center here in Prague by my corporation, we have always worked for automation. And honestly, this helped very much to create a certain workforce. You know, mostly we have very young employees to contribute very actively in terms of creativity, creating opportunities, trying to bring new ideas, and this is continuing. Now, what is changing now is that, as far as I can see, and certainly the people that are more expert than me under a technical perspective can confirm or disagree, but I think that the new technologies start to be much easier to be applied. In the past, we used to do very big projects, $1 million project, only big corporation could do these things. Now with the new technologies, the automation, in my view, is becoming much more affordable by all the companies. I was using an unusual term in this area a few days ago with my colleagues. I think that the new technologies are much more democratic. Also, the small companies can apply them, not only the big corporations. And this can bring the people closer and closer to the innovation. My experience with the people and the employees we have is that in the past, they were passively accepting the automation. Now they are contributing. In this sense, I am very optimistic. Also, I am optimistic in the sense that there are many aspects of the daily life of the people, like work-life balance, possibility to work from home, possibility to have a more flexible working day, that can contribute also the life of the people and not only to the earnings of the big companies.
Excellent. Corina.
I'm an optimistic as well. I believe that the 4.0 revolution that you are talking about is a huge opportunity for us, and to mostly to develop new skills and to focus on more strategic skills and work. So I believe this, from a consultant point of view, I think this is a huge opportunity for players in all industries. And
do you think there'll be winners and losers, though?
Yes, probably there will be, but I think on the long run it's an opportunity. And as PricewaterhouseCoopers was remarking in a study in 2016, 33% of the companies were already highly digitalized, and this number is expected to achieve almost 3/4, 72% by 2020. So I think we are in the full process of digital transformation.
Excellent. So Andrea, optimist or pessimist?
I'm a pessimist in the sense that, of course, there are opportunities. They are huge, and AI is a great opportunity, but we are about to face a big transformation and a big transition. And this big transition, I think, requires solid nerves and a sense of direction, and requires, as a consequence also, stable and enlightened government, the ability to really think medium long term in terms of reforming, reshuffling our welfare system, aggressive initiatives to upskill existing workers, strategies to compensate workers that will inevitably lose their jobs for the period in which they will need to be reskilled, strategies for companies that will have to upgrade the skills of their workers while they are working. So we'll probably be talking about work-life train balance, not just work-life balance, which is already a myth in many countries. All this requires ambitious ideas. Now, we come from 2 plenary sessions that have been relatively depressing, in my opinion, because not because the speakers weren't good, but because the speakers were listing the challenges. And then at the end, maybe just because balance requires it, adding a footnote by saying, but by the way, we can do it. But the list of challenges was overwhelming. And so this is what scares me and this, for now I close. It scares me because I do believe that Central Europe needs the whole of Europe to thrive in AI, because US and China are 2 very big giants that otherwise would really dominate us in this. And it needs a very specific, sophisticated, complex, acrobatic strategy to thrive in AI, which maybe I'll elaborate on later. And I don't think we're anywhere close to this, despite the ambitions and the interesting ideas that are being tabled, in particular by the European Commission these days.
Excellent. It's good to have a contrasting voice on the panel. So, Michal, what's your...
Charles is paying me to be a pessimist.
It's never good to have a panel which always agrees with each other.
Exactly.
Michal.
I pretty much subscribe to everything that Andrea said, with the only exception that I'm positive. I'm optimist. I actually believe that that AI can provide us with a great opportunity for changing our jobs to better. I don't believe the US predictions, what they say that only, what do they say? They said that like 4% of jobs being paid less than $20 per hour will survive in the next, I don't know, 10 years or something, while only 4% of jobs paid more than $40 an hour will be displaced. I actually don't believe that. I don't think it's a matter of income. It's a matter of how complicated is it for AI to replace this or the other job. So I actually think that lots of jobs that are mental, not blue-collar jobs, but white-collar jobs, will be replaced much more easily than the blue-collar jobs. And the reason why is that your AI will be hungry. Your AI will not get satisfied only with like low-paying jobs being taken away, but it will be more aggressive for high-paying jobs. And I actually think that this whole transformation is a great opportunity for us to get away from monotonous jobs that are not creative, that are still the same, stable, doesn't require people from being innovative, think out of the box, represent a creative thinking, changing status quo. So all these jobs will go, and machines are great for those jobs, while people are better for other jobs. And I actually think that AI can help us to divide the job landscape towards where people are better and can provide a better value longer term, and where machines are better and can provide better value in the longer term. The truth is, there is lots of prerequisites in front of us, and changing the way how the economical wealth will be distributed so that these societies will continue to be stable and operate is a huge challenge that kind of nobody figured out as of yet. We will have to rethink the concept of work. Work not any longer will be this thing that creates economical value. Work will be understood much more broadly, and especially education, right? So education is a key for us to get ready for this new time. And me as an educator, I don't believe that we any longer need 5 years universities. We need long life education. So there's a dramatic change, in the way how we would be getting trained and retrained.
And thank you. And I assume that you're an optimist, Milan.
Yeah, it probably won't come across as a surprise that I'm a tech optimist. It's quite difficult to say something new, being the fifth person on this group panel. So yes, of course there are many challenges related to the automation and the AI machine learning advancements, and as was rightly pointed out, there's a much need for cooperation between the tech companies and the innovators, as well as public administration, politicians, experts, trade unions. These challenges really need to be dealt with in a cooperation. But why we are optimistic? Partly to what Professor Pěchouček already said, that the AI will originally be replacing those like low-skilled jobs to a large extent, and it will still take some time before the shift changes. It's not going to be that fast as we sometimes read. At least that's what I believe. And when you look at the job markets, for instance, in this very country with very low unemployment, where many of the jobs that we can expect the AI will replace first are already being unfilled, then this is something which also like helps us to think about this as an opportunity rather than a threat. Of course, and one last thing I would point out too is that this goes back to the education. Many jobs will not be replaced; they will just dramatically change. So you will need new skills by 2020. Many jobs will require skills that are still not yet there. They are definitely not being taught at schools. So this lifelong education is going to be absolutely crucial for societies to be able to react to the change.
Excellent, thank you very much. And turning to the audience, how many optimists and pessimists do we have in the room? So hands up, anyone who's more optimistic than pessimistic. Thank you very much. That's about half the room. About the pessimists. Interesting. So that corner of the room is the pessimistic corner.
You could
Back
follow
over
us.
there is the optimistic.
I think it's a big change. In front of a change, a big challenge. In front of a challenge, you can be optimistic or pessimistic. I think both of us should just see the reality, the pros and cons, and how complex it is to manage, to give governance to this change. I think that's quite normal, I would say.
Yes. So, I mean, starting off with somebody who's, at the coal face of change and the sort of accounts payable has turned to a shoebox of screwed up receipts about 100 years ago to being, where anyone can send their expense claims in via, a mobile app from the other side of the world. I mean, how is the current wave of changes in terms of automation, digitization, your industry now different from than it was 10, 15 years ago when you were...
I would say, of course, I'm talking about services only. So I am from a big oil company. I'm not talking about technology in the manufacturing or in the drilling or all these things. I'm talking mostly for services and in particular for the business service centers, which you know is a very big component of the economy here in the Czech Republic. So in this area, the change is in my view, very significant. As I said before, the technology is the key difference. In the past, we were doing big projects. Only big multinationals could do this kind of projects. $1 million invested. Very often, the final return was lower than expected. The second element I see, in particular, because we are not paper dependent anymore, I see a big change in the external world. What was happening in the past is that a company like ExxonMobil was doing a big project to automate, and then we were going to the external world, to our vendors, please adapt to what we want. Now it's completely changed. Also, you know that most of the governments are mandating electronic invoicing or electronic documentation and so on. This is helping to put in place automation very easily because it's the external world that tends to be standardized. So the management of change is definitely much smaller. The third company is the people. I have heard a lot of words about reskilling, component of the workforce that stays behind. Very true. But if we look in particular to here in the Czech Republic and to the BSc world, what I see is that the vast majority of the people are, let's say, digital native. I can use this expression. Sometimes we call them millennials, sometimes Y generation, Z generation, all these things. But anyway, they are people that want to automate. They like to be creative and help us management to bring new ideas. I have many people in my team, which is quite large, about 200 people here in Prague, that are bringing new ideas and want us to implement them. This is for me a big change. To do the management of change nowadays in the area of the automation is much easier, and because of that is much cheaper. And because of that, I'm sorry, I'm working in a private company. It's much more convenient and brings much better results. So that's also an area of my optimism. That's why I'm more optimistic, if you want.
So I mean, there's benefits and risks of
exactly.
using these technologies.
It's much easier, much faster, much less effort. The world outside is ready to receive this. In the past, honestly, we were forced to ask our clients, our vendors, please adapt to us. And obviously, you can understand that not all were available.
But what are the risks here as a manager?
Well,
introducing
this sort of new risk areas, yes, I see them very clearly. Well, obviously, not the entire population of our employees are capable to stay behind. So reskilling, upskilling, call as you prefer, is obviously a challenge. That is a must. The other risk, I mean, I ask for your help in this area if you want. In the past, as we were doing big projects, as managers, we were sitting down, doing beautiful workshops, creating a big design, try to put all the pieces of the puzzle in the frame of a very well built constructions. Now, very often, with these new technologies, we are just grabbing low-hanging fruits. We are just trying to optimize and automate the pieces of the process. And I see a little bit of risk that sometimes we lose the full picture. That's a risk that I see. I'm not sure if you can confirm or help me on this specific aspect.
Excellent. Excellent. I mean, the final question I was going to ask is that there's this question about whether automation will, shift more processes back to richer parts of Europe and America, and as your company has centralized a lot of these functions across many parts of the world in Czech Republic, do you think generally there is a threat of jobs being or a few jobs being reshored from to the rich world now that automation can do these lower added value tasks?
This is really a nice question because I think it's a very new discussion that we can bring on the desk. Certainly I see some aspects. So the first one, if we lose the transactional job and we progressively lose them, certainly the cost of the labor for the low-level activity will be less and less important. That's a matter of fact. So if in the past there was a very strong temptation to bring digitalization, data entry in countries with a very low labor cost, I think that in the future, and it's just my perspective, this could reduce more and more. So the winning countries will be, as it was said, will be the ones that will be able to create a workforce with a good level of, let's say, digital capabilities. I can use this word, I think, to share. The second aspect, and this is even more relevant for the business service centers, is that we started here in Prague, in example, 14 years ago as a transactional center. And the reason why we were here probably was, let's say, the labor cost. Now we are becoming, from a service center, a partner of the business. We are bringing new ideas, we are bringing new solutions, and because of that, in my view, it could be a little bit more necessary to be closer to the business. If you want to be a good partner, you cannot be on the other side of the world. If you want to be a good partner, you need to be available for your customers. You need to help them in the time they need and not tomorrow or after tomorrow. So in this sense, there could be, I would say, a certain trend to have the activities concentrated in BSCs that are very well available for the customer. Europe is also very well placed. I think this is, I call, an eternal asset, that we are in a time zone where we can easily serve both sides, East and West, and this, I think, is a competitive advantage, and Czech Republic is very well placed in this sense.
So is this one of the reasons why you're optimistic?
I would say yes. I think yes, but when you work in a corporation, in a company, and you have to lead a team, in some way you need to bring very clearly also the positive aspect of a change. Otherwise, you don't embrace the change. You just stop.
Excellent. And talking about change, I was going to ask Michal, as a professor of computer science, how is the current, in terms of how technology is changing? What from a computer science perspective, what's changing now compared to 10, 15 years ago? What's new, which in computer science, which is changing the world now that it wasn't 10, 15 years ago?
So what's new is the fact that kind of all the pieces of a puzzle are kind of getting together, right? So we see that your AI is really working, and it's really creating a lot of economical value. This is the huge change, right? We've been working on AI for the last 60 years. This is like it's not the blockchain, right? It is like a traditional computer science field that has been around since Turing. And only recently we are seeing us being able to harvest the results of long time research in computer science and artificial intelligence. We're obviously seeing this trend of high performance AI, where we have those deep neural networks being able to do tasks and functionalities that we never thought would be possible. But currently we are seeing lots of challenges in computer science research that we are seeing as a big bottlenecks for future adoption of artificial intelligence. And one of the major, actually, these days is explainability. The fact that the most successful high-performance AI lacks explainability, so therefore it's very difficult to track down in deductive manner how this or the other particular decision has been made, which for some reason is okay in some domains, like autonomous driving, so we pretty much don't care that your cars will be driven by algorithms that we can understand. That's totally okay. But in domains like healthcare, I think that we won't be able to adopt non-explainable AI. So Explained before, AI is a big thing that we need to track down and understand. One of the fathers of deep learning, Jeff Hinton, out of Toronto, he is telling that we need to rethink the whole concept of machine learning and to kind of go back away from deep nets and try something else, maybe closer to logic. So it's like one big challenge, one big field. The other big challenge is adversarial machine learning. Us being able to not only build ML algorithms that can do all those great things, but be able how the adversary can deceive and mislead the algorithms so that they in the end do something else because the adversary wants us to do this. And cybersecurity is a nice example, right? In cybersecurity, there's like lots of AI. There has been, there was AI for many years on both sides, the attacker and the defenders. And being able to figure out how AI can be robust against attackers, that's a huge research problem these days. The next one is lack of data, right? Machine learning AI is a function of how great data we have and how well massaged data we have for algorithms and how big volumes. And there are obviously use cases where we just don't have the data because we are thinking about the future. And these days, we are building AI algorithms for the future use cases. For example, for the autonomous cars and the traffic. So we need to understand how the infrastructure in cities is supposed to be laid out. But we don't have the data, right? We don't know. So a multi-agent simulation and the AI capability to simulate the future scenarios in high fidelity, believable manner is another huge, big opportunity. And the last but not least is data markets. We actually don't perfectly understand what is the economical value of this or the other piece of data. So just, everybody is crazy these days collecting data, storing data, working with data, but we actually don't know how directly to represent the data to economical value. Thus, there are no data markets. As soon as AI engineers will be able to come up with like a sophisticated backends for in real time to be able to understand the economical value of the data, we will be seeing the world of data markets where people will be sharing, buying, selling data and using it for different purposes.
So, I mean, in terms of when people are talking about AI, what's AI and machine learning, what's possible in the future or what not? Do people exaggerate how quickly things are moving, or underestimate how, or are they saying it's moving faster than?
Yeah. So people are asking me when, and I always say that the only true answer is earlier than you think, right? So that's for fact. And I always tell this story with my family. I've got like small kids, and I always, during the dinner time, tend to say that when I was younger, there were no cell phones and all this bullshit that parents say. And my daughter, she's 10, she tells me, oh, Daddy, when I was young, there were shop assistants in Tesco's, and they are not there anymore. So even at this age, you see that the kid of the age of 10 sees the change, right? So the change is like really faster. And because it's so fast, it's different to all the changes that we lived through like 50 years ago, 100 years ago, 250 years ago. And education used to catch up always, right? This time, there is no way. It's way too quick.
Okay. So is that where the risk is that in previous waves it was slow enough to people to retrain and get used to this idea, companies even to get used to this idea, whereas now the technology is moving more quickly, and therefore people can't train themselves quickly enough. I mean, is there any way to accelerate education?
Yes. Yeah. My recommendation is for the state provided educational system to kind of lay down a bit, do not be dominant, take like less of a role, and provide more space to children's individual educational initiatives, projects, to NGOs to come to schools and industry to come to schools, and kind of everybody to chip in. But you do not rely on the school system as we know it today, where there's a system, state-funded, private, takes I don't know, 5 or 6 hours every day to the kids, and us as a parents, we think that we are all sorted. That's, it won't work. And everybody needs to understand that, it's only like a small part of what the kids need.
Indeed, yeah. And also, I imagine it's education, so it's getting it's the idea that people have multiple careers in their lifetimes rather than simply
yes, very much so.
having a job, being trained to do one thing, having a job for life. That's
Yes.
very interesting. So moving on to the topic of, to what extent will these industry, throwing this slightly more open to the panel, but in particular to Andrea and Corina, sort of the optimist and the pessimist on the panel. Do you think that this new wave of technology is something which is going to particularly affect Eastern Europe compared to other places in Europe or other places in the world, or is Central Europe more or less vulnerable in a good way and a bad way to the changes that this new wave of technology is going to bring? Should we start with the optimist?
Okay, so I believe that, now I'm quoting from our research, which was made on more than 150 companies and answered by the same number of leaders. Their position is that a positive change will take place, and this is the position of 90% of the respondents. So it's, and we're talking about Romania, which is not necessarily one of the best economic examples. So they mentioned in response to their optimism, higher productivity and efficiency in their companies, shorter delivery terms and with better results, less human errors and biases, tasks done much easier, and of course a financial impact. Of course that could also translate to less jobs and some lost jobs, but also to more efficient people who do more efficient tasks. And they would also see the benefit and impact on their reshifting to new, better strategic tasks, for example, like business development or innovation. So they believe that that's the motivation for their positive perspective. As for the impact on jobs, of course, there will be a job reduction, but also, as I was saying, the opportunity to develop new skills. And I believe that on the long run, also to reduce stress for repetitive tasks that automation could take on.
So is this the idea that if you can reduce the amount of repetitive strain injury and by embracing automation in a factory, workers no longer have to do the same task all day. You don't have to send people down the coal mines to breathe in all the nasty coal dust because you could send a robot in to do it. I mean, do you think there'll be an improvement in the work environment due to this?
Yes, of course. I think, leaders in Romania already started to retrain and reassign skills and tasks to their teams. So the tasks that are taken over by automation and AI are now taking care of them, and their employees, the people in their teams, are now able to do new tasks, and they already started to retrain them. So,
I mean, is there risk though? I mean, this is all very nice and well for companies, but there's a risk of the commoditization of labour. I mean, I'm talking here about Uber for taxis, for Airbnb disrupts the hotel business. There's all these companies commodifying either sharing assets or commodifying labour and making jobs more flexible, yes, and this might be nice if you're Uber, to have this, but also making jobs far more precarious. And is there a threat to job security from this sort of technology?
Yes, well, we already are facing outsourcing as a business as usual, and also working with freelancers as well. So I think this will offer people new opportunity to discover themselves and actually see how they can actually contribute in a positive manner in their environment.
And excellent, thank you. Andrea, is there anything you want to respond to in that?
An element of skepticism in the sense that we, as an economist, we don't know many things. The MIT, for example, compiled recently all the results of some of the major studies on the impact of work, of automation on jobs, starting with Osborne and Frey, the 2013 study from the two researchers at Oxford. And basically you see everything in its opposite. It depends on the underlying assumptions. Some studies say there will be an increase of 10% in available jobs. Others say that there will be a decrease in 47%. Others, for example, OECD and others are more doing their calculation based on the tasks that will be replaced. But of course, there is an element of connection between the task and the number of jobs, because there is, the human-to-machine ratio is about to change, and it will be changing ongoing. So the underlying conclusion, the overall conclusion from this collection of studies, anyway, is one, that people that say that there's no problem are probably in denial. But there are many things we are in denial with, and especially in the US. Think about climate change. And but we are in denial also of this. And I think I would rather shift the perspective in this respect from a more policy-oriented view and say, are we just about to witness this transition without doing anything? Or are we just working and focusing on automation and robotization and as if they were sort of ends by themselves? AI by itself, is this a goal for us, speeding up the deployment of AI? No, I don't think it is. It's not. Our goal is different, and the EU in principle is trying to set its narrative for 2030. It's based on sustainable development, it's based on the sustainable development goals. In the sustainable development goals, you have things like stepping up human capital, decent jobs, reducing inequality, gender issues. All these issues are relevant when it comes to looking at how we accompany automation into the job market. It's not that every job that can be automated should be automated. It's not that necessarily everything that technology can do has to happen. Because of course then we talk about autonomous weapons, and then we think that since it's possible we should have autonomous weapons, whereas there is a big debate at the global level and even in the UN now as to whether there should be a ban, like chemical weapons also to autonomous weapons. So I think we need to understand exactly how to accompany the transition. There are certain things that are open in the public debate that I think we have to discuss more, and they require big debate and also, as I was saying before, big institutions, because the employer-employee relationship is not going to be the same as it used to be in the past. And the welfare and the pension system for a worker that hops on and off from different types of jobs has to be different. The role of trade unions has to be different, otherwise they'll disappear. And they're a bit vanishing anyway, if they don't relaunch themselves as being able to represent a wide variety of different types of workers. So all this has to change over time. Someone has to orchestrate this change. In my opinion, it's rather a pan-European effort, but I know that when it comes to the social policies, typically there's always this tension between the EU level and the national level because the prerogatives are national. And indeed, I think since we're here in Prague European Summit, there is a lot of the people maybe in the audience are more like institutions and let's say governance people and not necessarily techies. We are currently in a situation in which, especially for things such as the European Pillar of Social Rights, we are in a condition of sort of stalemate, if you want. If you look at the governance of the European Union today, I mean, you can like the EU politicians, you can like better the national ones if you have some, if you have a government. In Italy, it's complicated. But the current situation is perfect for the national leaders to Europeanize all the failures and nationalize all the successes. But this makes it very difficult to organize a meaningful debate on the future of work at the pan-European level. But indeed, this is what we should be doing. Because the problems that the Czech Republic will have, the problems that Romania will have, can be fixed in several ways. Can be fixed through solidarity, through the multi-annual financial framework, can be accompanied through exchange of best practices, through the organization and strategic views of how to approach industrial policies in different parts of Europe. And I don't think the Czech Republic can do it alone. And of course, if it has a strong and stable and continuous and inspired and enlightened government, that would be easier. But does it? That's the first question. But second, even if it does, I think it simply doesn't have the scale to solve this problem.
And I mean, what sort of policies or strategies or approaches should be introduced to European level? You mean you were saying
at the
earlier
pan-European
that
level, I think we're working on two streams, and then you see. I mean, sometimes when we want to talk about, describe something that is difficult, we call it walking on the tightrope. Here it's working on two tightropes. Okay, so imagine how difficult. And the first is, in my opinion, in order to, if you want to maximize say, European competitiveness and then create space for as many jobs as possible, the first is the ability of Europe to create global standards. The GDPR is a good example. Many companies around the world are trying to now adapt to the GDPR, even if they are non-European companies, even if they are British companies, but even if they're Australian, even if they're Australian or US companies, they see the GDPR as the only meaningful, comprehensive and structured standard on data protection. And also if they want to attack and have access to our 500 million relatively rich consumers, they need to be compliant. So I think what is happening, despite the fact that we don't know yet what the compliance rate will be in Europe, that's a big challenge. But what we are seeing is that people, I mean, as you've seen, the landscape is pretty depressing when it comes to EU politicians, meaning we see more challenges and opportunities. And when it comes to the GDPR, some people in particular in DG Connect, but even in DG Justice, have sort of had a breath of fresh air because they say, oh my goodness, we are doing it. We are creating a standard, and we are sort of imposing that standard in other parts of the world. Now, can AI, because of something like this, can the EU approval of, for example, ethics-compatible AI or human-friendly AI or specific codes of conduct and ethics, can this lead to European-approved products and services as being a quality signal, a quality mark? Can we regulate AI in Europe in a way that creates a global standard? That's a big challenge first. Very difficult, of course. Happy to elaborate further on this. The second is, you're only credible if you set a global standard if you are maybe not the most competitive, and you don't have the biggest supercomputer, the first to develop the quantum computer that really has enough qubits, but you can do this if you are decently competitive. And this is where the other strand in EU policy is coming. So first of all is the norms. The new AI alliance that was launched a few days ago basically has to work on the creation of a codes of ethics, on a revision of existing legislation to create a comprehensive framework, and we are light years away from it, but the work is now ongoing. And the other one is the money and the strategies. So the multi-annual financial framework and the budget has already created, first of all, a big chunk of the budget that has been earmarked directly for Digital Europe. It's 9.2 billion, I think, for the next multi-annual framework, and within that 2.5 billion euros will be on AI-related infrastructure. But mostly also of the Horizon Europe, a new 100+ billion euro program, the next framework program for research and innovation. There's a big part that is dedicated to new technologies and in particular artificial intelligence, but also others. Now, alongside with these ones is also a view of the idea, at least, of some policymakers in Brussels will see then when they go through Parliament and Council what survives, the idea that there should be a more mission-oriented approach on AI. And the mission cannot be having the fastest supercomputer. It should be having a harmonious development of people and machines. And one of the ideas that I've heard also yesterday, I launched a new working party on this at CEPS in my think tank, where Michal is coming in a couple of weeks to visit us. The idea from the European Commission to create a CERN for AI in Europe that is probably based on scaling up some of the existing big research centers. The biggest research center on AI is in Germany today. So pushing on the industrial policy, pushing on the, let's say, financing of initiatives on the one hand, but also the ethical dimension. And one footnote to this, when it comes to codes of ethics, there are several codes of ethics that exist.
Yeah.
There's one that is that I like to quote very often. I don't know if Michal, you were involved in that too, is the Asilomar principles.
Yes.
The first principle there is preserving human control over machines. This is enormously important for the future of work.
Yeah. And I mean, touching upon several things there, in particular GDPR and the backlash against big tech. Europe wants to take its industrial strategy in a certain way that some of the big tech giants might not want it to, in terms of competition, in terms of building a CERN for AI. I mean, to what extent is automation and digitization itself now being disrupted? I'll open this to the whole of the panel.
In what sense? Meaning if it's...
Oh, I mean by regulation, government regulation.
Okay.
I.e. GDPR, I mean, restricts the ability of companies to harvest your data and process it.
Because I let others speak. I
Yeah.
have my opinion on this, but of course I already spoke like I gave a long
So should we get what does Google think of this topic? I mean, you've been battered by the competition department keeps suing you at the moment, and I mean, to what extent how dangerous is this backlash against digitization and automation in Europe?
Well, the question is to what extent it can help the innovation. There was a discussion about the GDPR, and in terms of GDPR, the basic idea of having like a sort of good level of privacy is something that everyone who is a sort of responsible tech company sort of is going to sign up for. And if you look at GDPR, and if you look at, for instance, Google's policies, even before the legislation was introduced, like majority of these things were already in place. Of course, then the problem becomes when the regulation, which is supposed to sort of strengthen the digital single market, is not always really doing so. And with this specific regulation, which is somewhere between the regulation and directive, this is not really in the end the case, and we are still waiting for the implementation of the majority of the countries. So that's the thing, like very, very good idea, which everyone would sign up for, needs to be well thought through, well prepared. It needs to be well analyzed before it's actually introduced, and then well implemented. So unless this can be achieved, it's going to be very difficult for any company in Europe to operate, to innovate, and to make sure that they can actually grow. And it doesn't really matter whether it's a big tech company from the US or whether it's a small company from the Czech Republic or anywhere across the Europe. It's going to be very difficult for that company. So now we are, of course, looking at DSM
so,
and
Michal,
Please.
Yeah, I just wanted to finish that everyone is really rooting for DSM. But we are 1 year from the end of the DSM when you look at the key pieces of the legislation. And if you ask a question whether they really helped achieving the digital single market, then I will leave this as an open question.
sorry,
So, me as a scientist, I should be really excited about the world without GDPR, because we have all the data, we can crunch it, we can play with it, we can build those great machines that can predict whatever we want to do in the future, right? As a citizen, I'm much more worried, and not necessarily about privacy disclosure, but about manipulation. I actually think that the time when AI manipulates the way how we live and how we make decisions, what we consume as a content, I think it will not last forever. I call this like AI Wild West, where we are manipulated by AI and we don't understand it. I actually think that introducing some laws that would help us to really govern the use of AI will be important for people to understand, to get like a better grip on how they live and what AI is doing with them, right? So why is Google selecting those pieces of news that you read every day? You know, it's okay to take their news, but you need to understand why they are giving you exactly those news, right? So there needs to be some explanation, and you opt into it or you don't, right? You may want to take somebody else who will who will give you the recommendations. You know, Netflix is suggesting great movies, but you know, it would be actually smart for you to know why. You know, how they are shaping your cultural opinions, right? So do you agree with that or you don't? So this manipulation transparency, I think this is like a super important piece which is in front of us. And this is why I strongly believe in all those movements around open source AI, where you know, the researchers and also citizens do have an opportunity to understand, to cut the code into pieces and to get some better understanding why the AI is telling you what it is telling you, right? So I'm thinking that this is like a big opportunity for legislators and for policymakers to make change that in the end will not restrict us as much, but it will give us more understanding. People will start understanding AI.
Excellent. Milan, sorry, did you want to come back on that?
I absolutely agree. And for any tech company, I would say that it might sound as a cliche, but the main value the company has is the trust of the users, and that's why. And you know, like, and again, speaking on behalf of Google, but probably all tech companies, we haven't been doing really a great job, and there is always a much space for improvement. And for instance, in terms of GDPR, we're also thinking how to make sure that we are better explaining our policies, how we are doing things, why we are doing things to the users, to the advertisers, and to everyone. So, for instance, a practical example: when there were the changes of the terms of condition that you received all those thousands of emails, we didn't really need to do that. But how we looked at it was how to simplify, not really to make it even more complicated. So now, when you look at the Google account, where you have everything about how we deal with the privacy and the security, we introduced short videos to explain to people how these principles work, instead of reading 30, 40, 50 pages of legal text. So it has already been here, and this doesn't only affect the AI. With AI, the scale is going to be even more important, even bigger, and it also requires even more thinking. So there's again, like, speaking on behalf of the company, there has been the partnership on AI, cooperation between all the big tech companies in California, inviting thinkers and experts and academicians to work on some common principles how to deal with AI. We just introduced the AI principles of Google. That are 6 principles that really need to be reflected in everything that we've been doing in AI. Right. Again, that the reason why we introduced this was that we were not always doing it right.
Right. I mean, I looked at these principles earlier. I mean, first one was be socially beneficial, and then second is avoid creating or reinforcing unfair bias. And there's been some criticism that these are very loosely worded. And how do you actually measure? How do you measure these? How can somebody hold you account? Because it's quite difficult. Because it's quite difficult. I mean, what is the definition of unfair and fair? And I was wondering whether what's Google's view to actually firmer regulation from government and super government bodies about holding you to your principles?
Well, I think we are very open to it. I think, like, once you create some principles, but this is again, these principles are not being introduced because the legislation asked us to do. They were introduced before any legislation actually entered into force. So, as a responsible company, you need to make sure that there are principles, and if you stick to them, then the legislator will not need to regulate. So I would say that they might be, yes, they might sound quite general, But then it's about leadership, and it's about every single employee of the company to actually like sign up for these principles, to publicly lay them out, to be open to criticism, to be open to recommendations. The accountability of the principles is absolutely crucial. That's why we have several hundred academicians who are publishing hundreds of academic papers, supporting researchers to work on it independently, open sourcing the tools. So this everything goes back to the need to really stick to these principles. They might be rather vague. It doesn't mean that they will not change eventually.
Yeah, that very much makes sense. And unfortunately, we are starting to run out of time, and I want there to be plenty of time for questions from the floor and from the questions coming up on the Slido. I'll take one from there and one from the floor each time. So apparently the most popular one in terms of likes is, will automation allied to neoliberal socio-economic models exacerbate the divides that some have claimed to have led to the rise of populism? So this is essentially asking, will automation exacerbate the socio-economic divides which some have claimed have led to the rise of populism? So I was wondering if we had any views from panels. I was wondering if, Andrea, you had a...
As a pessimist, when I've self-declared for this, there is a risk, of course. Then the projections on the initial polarization of the job markets, very low skill, very high skill, and then eventually only towards the high skilled. The reduction in the number of jobs and the increased competition for the jobs that will be remaining. All this in principle leads to increased divide. With new technologies that have this potential, there's always the risk. But at the same time, AI comes with an equally strong potential for access by everybody and discrimination, and perfect discrimination of people. And is what you do with it that changes. We have a specific problem, I think, at the European level that we need to fix if we don't want that to happen, which is we don't seem to be having an innovation problem in Europe. Despite the fact that there has been over the past 2 decades a sort of a performance anxiety on innovation in Europe by many political leaders, the fact is that if you look at the data, if you look at the empirical studies, what really makes a difference in Europe is the diffusion of innovation. We have not only the divide between the rich and the poor, the employed and the unemployed, we have divides in particular also between frontier firms and what we call the zombie firms in Europe, the ones that don't catch up to technological development. The lack of technological transfer and knowledge transfer and circulation in many markets. The divide also, including in Central Europe, between metropolitan areas and rural areas. All these are divides that we need to try to at least fix or reduce if we want the ongoing divergence to be reduced as well over time. Otherwise, concentration will take over, and that concentration means that there will not be space for everybody. One example of this, just to give you an idea of the magnitude, currently Facebook spends approximately, as far as I know, 1% of its turnover on labor. Walmart used to spend 40%. So, do I need to add anything to this? I mean, the only thing that I've been involved into that can, in such a big transition, might try to rebalance the ongoing divide, apart from investing in education and skills and the things that we have already mentioned, is finding new ways to remunerate work, or to remunerate people for their mere existence. So it's the universal basic income, which in my opinion is a bit more problematic, but I'll maybe leave.
Well, we've got another question coming up on the board about universal income.
One new form of remuneration of labor that has been discussed, and I had the chance of discussing this with the Global Commission on the Future of Labor of the International Labor Organization a month ago in San Francisco, is the idea that you could actually remunerate people for the data that they contribute to platforms, or from informational work that they do, or for the fact that they participate to platforms, even software developer platforms such as Upwork or Mechanical Turk, where you can find providers of services that are very often under-remunerated. But I think this is at its embryonic state in terms of debate. Well, we might find new ways to remunerate people for what they do. On this one, the only thing I want to say is that I don't think we'll end up remunerating people for the fact that they contribute data to Facebook. I don't think it will work.
Why do you think that's the case?
Well, I came up with two possible scenarios. Imagine that Facebook remunerates people on an equal basis per kilobyte of data, whatever. Then I will go to my drawers, take all the photos of puppies, grandmas, and granddads, and that I can throw at Facebook, and I'll throw it at Facebook. There will be an overproduction of data. I don't think it will be very useful. It will probably congestion excessively the social network. So the only
and if you compress your data,
the alternative scenario. The alternative scenario is that what would make sense, what we call separating equilibrium in economics, would be that the more valuable data are remunerated, and the photos of puppies are not remunerated, right? But since Facebook has an advertising-based business model, the most valuable data, on average, come from the people with a higher willingness to pay and a higher income, because they are the ones that are targeted by advertising messages. So this system might exacerbate inequality. I mean, some people that are already maybe rich will be remunerated for the data that they contribute to the platform. The ones that are poor, their data don't count, because what can you buy when you're poor?
So it could make these divides even worse. That's very interesting point. Now I want to open this up to the floor. Does anyone have any questions for the panel? The chap at the back.
Yeah, hello, Benjamin Fallis from the Institute of International Relations here in Prague. Thank you very much to the panel for a very interesting discussion so far. But it strikes me that when we're talking about technology, actually these tend to be questions of politics that we're getting to. And so how do we, I mean, with the point about how we measure what is socially beneficial or so on and so forth, there are competing and contesting visions of that. And what is socially beneficial for Google is unlikely to be socially beneficial for everybody, and vice versa. So my question is, and I say this as something of a techno-optimist, what we've learned from previous moments and previous eras and ethics of techno-optimism, modernism being the prime example, is that in order for it to succeed, we have to bring people on board with it. And I think this is what is driving a lot of the questions that we've seen on the board. How can we actually make this inclusive when a lot of technological talk, technological jargon and so on is by its definition exclusive? How do we also bring people on board? And I'd appreciate concrete suggestions from the panel in this regard, when not everybody is on board with the idea. Not everybody wishes to be more creative, more efficient, more flexible, and so on and so forth. There are a lot of questions of politics at the micro and the macro level that are left unanswered by the kind of techno debate that actually dominates. And while we can appreciate what Google, what others are doing, and so on and so forth, the fundamental role of politics needs to be addressed in this, and I would appreciate to hear the panel's thoughts on that. Thank you very much.
So any concrete suggestions from the panel?
I don't want to be monopolizing.
Yeah, maybe like one thought, which is which answers some of your questions. That is that I actually believe that onboarding population is super important for the public, for the state, for the government, whose role is to provide for jobs, right? This is like super important. The expectation that people have from the government is safety and jobs. And jobs and safety is like really related. And we are discussing the fact that there'll be less jobs, jobs will be transforming, and we'll be spending more times at school in different times of our lives. But we still need economical value, right? That will be paying the bills of people. This piece is super important. And I actually think that the responsibility for the governments is to be able to think about jobs in two different dimensions, two different categories. One category is for kind of people to live meaningful lives and to contribute to the society and to do something which is meaningful, and at the same time to provide for the environment where economic value will be created. And these two things do not need to necessarily come hand in hand. Some can be more focused on like good quality of life for these citizens and providing everybody with the opportunity to do something meaningful, but they may not be enough businesses that would be creating the value that will be created in the future. So this balance is super important. And me as a scientist and serial entrepreneur in AI, my belief is that the more people understand, the more people are engaged, the more people really live through the technology and understand it and are willing to contribute, the higher likelihood is that in the region there'll be more jobs that will be creating economic value, right? So actually I think that what you're suggesting is very important for richness of a region, be it a city, be it a state, be it like greater community of nations. I think this is like super important because I actually believe that in the future there'll be rich and poor, but not on oil, but on work, right? There'll be regions that will be like really poor on work and will be dependent on others, and there'll be regions that will be like super rich on work because the work will be creating super great economic value, and those regions would be there to support others.
If I may just add, you can see it shifting from industry to services has always been here, and many argue that those jobs that will be replaced with AI, jobs that cannot be replaced with AI in the near future, are those that require human interaction. So we are getting back to services and to what Michal says about the changes within the jobs. Again, going back to the lifelong education, and one reason why I'm getting back to the optimism is that when you look at how the information is being distributed and consumed, there has been no age in time where people had bigger and better approach towards information. When you look at cell phone, its cost is now some $40 to $50, and it can do pretty amazing stuff. With the amount of information and the sort of complexity of the information flow is also one of the things that is sort of undisputed, and it has never been so in the history.
Very interesting. Any other questions? I know we've only got a few minutes left for questions, so any more from the floor? So there's one at the back there.
You got one on the left.
Sorry.
I have a question about blockchain. So, as you know, there's been a lot of hype in terms of the cryptocurrencies and things. However, there is a rise of ICOs and other things for pretty much blockchain for everything. And every time you have a company, a large company, that applies some sort of a blockchain solution to a small part of its business, its valuation and its stock go up. So I was just wondering, how do you see the future? Do you think it is the next big thing, blockchain things, or do you see it as a rather zeitgeist of a passing fun?
So if we could have a quick answer to this one, because I know there's other questions.
I can give a very quick answer.
Do you want to give a quick answer?
There's a lot of promise in blockchain. A lot of promise because as an architecture, as a distributed architecture, it incorporates some of the early features that the internet had in its early days, right? The idea of peer-to-peer networks, the idea of having something that is immutable, constantly verifiable. In my opinion, we shouldn't be looking at blockchain and its likely evolution, because it's as we speak, when we started the panel, when we finished, blockchain has already changed. What I think will be very interesting to see is the evolution of what I would call a new stack of technologies, which incorporates blockchain, AI, and the Internet of Things related technologies. That is, in my opinion, what is going to move very quickly towards the future, but maybe Michal has a different view.
Excellent. It was there a question on the left?
Yeah, so
Quickly.
I'd like to ask about, how do you think how will the social structure change because of automation? So if having a work would be a privilege.
Or a curse.
Workers.
Yes. No, well, I think that there are some changes that I am already experiencing in working in a large corporation. The first one is in terms of work flexibility. I think that nowadays, if you look at the surveys that many companies do on what the young population wants as a benefit, on top of the benefits, there is work flexibility. When I was younger, there were many other things. The salary was certainly on the top. Now is work flexibility. And we are, as companies, working very much in this sense. We are enabling more and more people working from home and with flexible working hours. This, in my view, can open the door also if we look at opportunities in terms of diversity, and as we can value people that nowadays are not always recognized appropriately by the companies. I don't know, sometimes I use an example. I see there are many ladies in the room, mothers with children. In the classic working structure, they had the problems to bring children at school and come back at a certain time and so on, because the work time was not flexible at all. Now we have many mothers that can work from home. They can work when they can. They are totally flexible. They are totally free to access the system when they want, and they contribute in a very high way and very good way to the results of the company. This could, in example, reduce many gender discriminations that are or used to be very visible in many countries, unfortunately also in the Czech Republic. Personally, I am very proud to have in my team many part-timers, many mothers, and many ladies that can contribute extremely well thanks to the flexibility that are offered by the automation nowadays. This is just one example, I would say.
But asking the panel, following up on the Slido questions, will increasing automation lead to a world where universal income is the only realistic solution to poverty, and that this is the argument that there'll be the owners of automation, big companies, tech companies will suck up an increasingly amount of the world's income, and there won't be enough jobs for everyone, or there won't be enough jobs to go around to people of a certain skill level. I mean, could basic income work? I mean, there's been mixed evidence from programs around the work. So very quickly, Andrea.
For me, this is, if you run the big formula, the wealth, the transfer from labor to capital, the fact that there will not be enough jobs, and there could be taxation and redistribution. Of course, you can imagine universal basic income as a way to compensate people and give them the means that they need to make a living. And we know that this is important also because inequality has now become also a Davos issue and a G7 issue, not just because people are suddenly caring about the poor, but because inequality, if people are too poor, there's not enough demand on markets, right? So we need consumers. And this has made this a right-wing and left-wing topic alike. In my opinion, what's the problem with universal basic income is that it doesn't solve the real problem that we have with the rising unemployment, which is the threat to social cohesion. Statistics tell us that empirically, the fact of being employed and having economic security, but being employed is a key element of subjective well-being. The fact of being let's say, on a universal basic income without being active on the labor market, as things stand currently, this might evolve over time. It's not something that, in my opinion, would bring particular benefits in terms of social cohesion, and this is a problem in terms of political stability. At the same time, then it depends on the girl that asked the question about the future social structure here. It depends what the time horizon here, because we could consider the Industrial Revolution as a quick parenthesis if we want. Mm-hmm. Before that, largely the richer people were the ones that didn't work. So that's what I was saying. I mean, it's not necessarily a privilege having to work in the future. It might have to be a curse. That rather to go to jail, you actually put to work, because just alongside the machines, whereas the others can dedicate themselves to social relationships and creativity and other forms of activities, because we've managed to delegate to machines most of the routine stuff.
Interesting. I suppose that's the optimist.
You see that in the end, I'm an optimist.
In the end.
You said that I had to play the pessimist.
And one final quick question for Corina and Leonardo. I mean, do you think there are any industries which will remain untouched by AI? I mean, this question suggests that on the board for social care might be caring for old people, or do you think every industry will eventually be affected by the industries of the fourth industrial revolution?
Yeah, probably it also depends on the region and the economical development of each country or region we're talking about.
So for this region, for Central Europe?
Actually, I'm not sure. I could mostly talk about industries that have been affected and could benefit from automation. But basically, companies that already have departments of marketing, sales, operations, purchasing, they could also already benefit from automation and digitization. So,
so even head office, the tornado of disruptions about to sweep through head office. So it's not just the people on the coalface who are being affected. Excellent. I think unfortunately, we have run out of time. And so I would like to thank our panel for some excellent contributions to this debate. And thank you for being an excellent audience, and thank you for your questions. And apologies to anyone whose questions we didn't ask either on the floor or on Slido. And some of our panel might be milling around the rest of the conference, so you can ask any burning questions you have there. But should we give a round of applause to our panel?